Okay, today I'm talking about 3 more Studio Ghibli films, and the names of those 3 films are Only Yesterday, Castle in the Sky, and Whisper of the Heart. Well, first up is Only Yesterday. This is a 1991 film. The basic premise is kind of loosey-goosey, and I didn't understand it for a good long while. So essentially, this woman in her late 20s just kind of meandering through life and is taking a summer off of her regular job to go work on a small little farm in the middle of nowhere countryside, and whilst on the way there, she reminisces about her time as a little girl in 5th grade. Yeah, I had to look up what the premise was, because like for the first 20 minutes, I was just completely lost. I'm like, I don't know which of these little kids is the main character, because I feel like we're jumping around from a lot of them. And then also, who are all these adults? I don't get it. So I did stop it after like 25 minutes and like looked up the premise, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. And then also the movie explained itself like the minute after I came back to it. So it was a thing. I don't know. There really isn't a super strong plot to this movie. The whole thing has a very slice of life feel to it. And honestly, I wish this movie kind of would have picked a lane, because it's very slice of life, but there is a bit of a plot. And I wish they either would have gone just completely slice of life and kind of just ignored adult stuff, or gone more heavy into the plot. So I would have liked for them to be even more disconnected or more legitimately connected. Anywho's it. I did still end up enjoying this movie. I did think it definitely worked for me. It just took a while to get into because I didn't know what the hell was going on. So I would recommend it, and I think you're sitting in a better place than I was because I've explained what the premise is. So you should have a bearing as the movie starts. So yeah, it's good. Next up is Castle in the Sky. Is a 1986 film that I may have seen before. I really have no idea, and it's been driving me crazy. Because like the movie started and I'm like, this feels familiar. But then the plot got going and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I'm like, well, I guess I didn't see this movie. But yet things felt very familiar. And I'm like, well, is this gonna happen? Oh, this happened. Oh, okay. So I don't know if A, I've seen this movie before, or B, this movie just really closely follows a lot of tropes and I just picked up on that. Either one's very likely, but the basic premise is this very hardworking, loved by the community teenage boy one day stumbles across this kind of mystical girl who's also an orphan. They're both orphans, and they're on the run from these bad guys who really want the mystical girl for reasons. And there's also a castle in the sky that's really cool. So I definitely enjoyed this movie. It was a very pretty movie, like all Studio Ghibli movies. And I in particular really enjoyed the performances of both of the main characters as well as the main villain. They definitely made me care about this movie, that it made me kind of put aside the fact that either I've already seen this movie or it follows tropes too closely, and just kind of they let me enjoy the experience of their performances. I will say too, I definitely loved the whimsy of this movie, especially when we get to like the castle in the sky stuff. Like that's peak Charlie Loves fantasy stuff. That sentence was poor. I like things that float in the sky. That's cool. And I like clouds, and there's some really cool clouds. It's my vibe. I love that. So yeah, I enjoyed this movie a good solid amount. I would recommend it if you're intrigued. It's definitely not a bad Studio Ghibli movie by any means. It's not a bad movie. It's good, fun, and enjoyable. Hopefully one day I'll figure out if I've seen it before or not. Who knows? Not me. And lastly is Whisper of the Heart. This is a 1995 film, and I definitely watched this movie on the wrong day. On a different day, I would have liked this movie a whole hell of a lot more, with that day probably being somewhere between 5 to 10 years ago, mostly because this movie heavily features a cover of the classic John Denver song, Country Roads. And like, that song's great. I definitely enjoy that song, but I'm kind of over that song at this point. I've heard it enough times. I don't really need a movie that's kind of just a love letter to that song, which is sort of what this movie is. I mean, it's more than that, but it's definitely not that. The basic premise is this little teenage girl is very worried about the future of her entire life and not sure of what to do, and then she meets a boy in a kind of fairy tale-like-ish way, and then he's very career driven, and so she's like, I'm gonna be career driven, and I guess that's the entire movie. It's cute. I definitely enjoyed it, and I liked, like, you know, the uncertainty of future and trying to follow your dreams, and then like feeling like you fail as you try to follow your dreams, but it's like also accepting those failures on the way to success, like that whole type of thing. I can definitely really relate to that, but it just for whatever reason didn't really resonate to me. Like the themes definitely did, but the movie itself didn't, if that makes sense. I don't know, it was definitely cute and fun. I did like it and enjoy it, and I also in particular liked that it was a very grounded film, that it wasn't like super high fantasy like some other Studio Ghiblis are. There are like a couple fantasy segments, but they're clearly like thoughts, like it's not actually real life happening. So this movie is very grounded-ish because it is fairy tale-like in its charm. So it was cute and fun. I did enjoy it, but I didn't watch it on the right day, and that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I would still say if you're intrigued by it, go for it. I'm not hating on this movie by any means. I'm just saying today wasn't its day for me, and that's okay. It happens. Alrighty, now for today's rankings. First up, we got Only Yesterday, sitting at number 56 in the quite like section. And then after that is Castle in the Sky, sitting at number 71. Also in the quite like section. And then bringing up the rear is Whisper of the Heart, sitting at number 95 in the like section. And this is out of a total of 159 old movies so far this year. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountain, country road. I forget the words. Take me home. Okay.